Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, very well indeed. So Boris in his pregnant horrors last night. Let's have a look at what he said about being asked to do so by Rishi.
How grateful I am to all of you for everything that you've been doing over the last few weeks, and for coming so late tonight to this venue, way past Keir Starmer's bedtime. We are now, if you are slightly surprised to see me, I want to be absolutely clear that I was glad when Rishi asked me to help. Of course I couldn't say no. And I'm here for one reason and one reason only, which is the same reason as all of you, all of us are here. We're here because we love our country. And whatever our differences, they are utterly trivial by comparison with the disaster we may face if these so-called opinion polls are right. And it's still an if. I think and hope the British people will show more sense on Thursday and draw back from the brink. But if these polls are right, then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction.
Bit of a throwback, Peter, to the what you might call the bad old days or the good old days, depending on your point of view about Boris Johnson. I haven't had a lot of reaction this morning from anyone saying, isn't it great to have him back? I mean, a few laughs. He shows up how Rishi Sunak's sort of slightly more serious tone is not as entertaining. But, I mean, it's almost as though you were watching something from a bygone era.
You're right, Mike, and he was certainly talking about things that were big issues when he was Prime Minister. For example, the COVID lockdowns, and he talked a bit about the post-COVID economic recovery, and although many people won't feel that that has actually been the case. Yeah, very interesting. He hasn't been a big feature of this campaign at all. In fact, I don't recall any public appearance that he's made throughout this campaign. There's certainly been lots of speculation that he would be involved, that he didn't even appear last night alongside Rishi Sunak. So Boris Johnson and certainly looked as if he'd had the effects of the sun in his face there, sort of tanned, maybe a little bit sunburned perhaps, but rousing the troops certainly at this late night event. But will it make any difference? I'm not so sure.
And was it aimed, do you think, at those Tories who might not be bothered, who might think, you know what, I'm just not going to bother voting because I don't really like the Conservative Party that it has become. I don't really feel like pushing the boat out, as it were, and I'm just not going to do it. And I mean, maybe those people, having seen him say that, will change their minds.
Yes, and there are a lot of people in 2019 who sort of lent the Conservative Party their vote, who may have voted for other parties, especially Labour, but others as well, but wanted to get Brexit done and were very worried about Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister. Well, actually now, you know, Boris Johnson was sort of appealing to them. And there was also a message for the Conservative Party itself saying whatever our differences, they wanted to avoid a Labour government. Well, actually, you know, there have been many, many differences within the Conservative Party. It's a very divided party as well. And Suella Braverman, for example, comments in the Telegraph today saying that the election is essentially lost and they need to move on. So there are many points that Boris Johnson was talking about sort of explicitly and implicitly as well. Again, the question is, does it make much of a difference on the eve of the poll? Now, it's interesting. This is the week. These are the few days. We've been talking about this for months, for weeks, certainly in regard to the campaign itself, Mike. But in terms of when people actually engage with the election, start thinking, oh yeah, hold on a second, polls are open tomorrow. Where have I got to go? And where's my voter ID? You need to bring it out this time and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not really talking about talk viewers and listeners who are much more engaged than usual people and have a lot more political knowledge than the man and woman on the street. But there are a lot of people who don't really engage with politics on a day-to-day basis who might see a clip of Boris Johnson and say, oh yeah, I voted for him in 2019, maybe I'll vote Conservative again. That's the gamble, or that's the intent anyway, of having Boris Johnson at this very late stage.
Right. I mean, Suella Braverman is quoted this morning as saying it's over. Mel Stride has apparently been doing a tour of some of the broadcasting operations this morning and talking about it all being over. I don't know whether that's a sort of last gasp attempt at trying to put people off voting, but I don't know why they would, because that might not necessarily help the Tories. The Survation poll, which I know is an MRP sort of model as much as it's a poll, says that 484 seats are going to be going for Labour. I've just seen a breakdown of that for London on the Evening Standard's website, in which it says the Tories will only get 3 seats in London.
Yeah, that's a total nightmare scenario for the Conservative Party. There are a number of polls coming out today. Today is the last day, of course, before polls open tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And there will be at least 5 or 6 different polls coming out. They're all going to say largely the same thing, a 99% chance of a Labour victory with a majority. That is the way things are going. And the question in this election, as it has been throughout this election, is not necessarily who wins. I think we probably know who wins. The question is, what does the opposition look like? How well does Reform UK do? What do the Conservatives look like? How many MPs do they have? Do they go under 100? It's going to be really, really interesting. And we'll, of course, cover it all, as you say, here on Talk.
And what about the postal vote sort of scandal? Because it seems as though that's still rattling around. A lot of people, I mean, I spoke to one of our viewers in France this morning who said that he only got his postal vote yesterday, and he's pretty sure it won't get in time to be counted, because if it's not in time to be counted, it can't be counted after 10 o'clock tomorrow night. A couple of other people have said that they haven't got their voter registration card yet either. So there's clearly a bit of a problem for some people.
Yes, and I think there are going to be problems as well, because this is the first major election. We've had local elections, although there's always low turnout, where you need voter ID, and every single person needs to bring voter ID. And I think that's going to end up with a lot of people either being sent home and told, you know, go and get your voter ID, or perhaps being told, go home and get your voter ID, saying, well, actually, you know, stuff this for a game of soldiers, I'm not going to bother voting. So I think that will be an issue. There are always teething problems. Certainly the Royal Mail denies there's any real problem. There's no backlog, they say, and these votes, the postal votes, should have gone out. Lots of people in England, of course, do, and Scotland and Wales do postal votes, far less so in Northern Ireland, where it's much more difficult to get a postal vote. But yes, it is certainly an issue, and people are complaining about it, and hopefully it'll get sorted out today. But I mean, even if you put a first-class stamp on your postal vote today, well, will it actually get there by tomorrow? And that's the problem with our postal service.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's absolutely true. Let's have a look at what Keir Starmer had to say yesterday. He was in Staffordshire appealing to voters.
We've been campaigning since day one, with a smile on our face, with a spring in our step, with a very positive case to take the country about change. And if you're a family that's been struggling for months and years with the bills bearing down on you because of the cost of living crisis, if you're a business that's been struggling for years because of the damage that's been done to the economy by this government, if you've served in uniform or served your community, then this campaign, this Labour campaign, is for you, and this fight for change is for you, because the choice at this election is clear and it is stark. We've had 14 years now of chaos, division and failure. We'll get more of the same if the Tories are back on Friday morning, or we can turn the page, or we can start to rebuild our country with Labour.
And Ed Davey was out as well.
To win the change our country so desperately needs. People across Cornwall and across the UK have been struggling to make ends meet. They've been working hard, raising their families, looking after their loved ones, playing by the rules, but it's just been really tough.
Davey there as well. You know, change is the sort of word of the moment, isn't it, I suppose, Peter? And it's almost as though no matter what the Tories do, there's nothing they can do.
People have stopped listening. People have stopped listening to the Conservative Party, even to Boris Johnson. And certainly Keir Starmer, you know, he's given the same speech, said the same things over and over again. It doesn't really matter. I mean, Keir Starmer could go and have a nice day off today. You know, he could go and do something nice and go to, I don't know, Chessington World of Adventures, hot on the heels of Ed Davey, and nobody would notice. You know, it wouldn't make a blind button of difference, I think, to the actual result here, because we know what's going to happen. Interesting to see Ed Davey in a suit, actually doing a traditional campaigning event, not doing a bungee jump, not on a roller coaster, not on a water slide. Although he seemed to have a sort of slightly losing his voice, as some campaigners often do towards the end of elections, and it's probably because he did a bungee jump yesterday. He was going to go and sort of way.
Yes, all that screaming as he's going down the roller coasters and everything else. Yeah, absolutely right. Well, Peter, I know you're going to be part of our election coverage tomorrow night. I've got a suggestion here from Robert, who says, because this has been the theme of the show, is Peter Cardwell. He says Caldwell. Peter Cardwell shirking from home? Certainly not. I'm sure you'll probably be in later, right?
I'll be in later on.
Absolutely brilliant. Great stuff, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you. Peter will be part of our coverage, of course, tomorrow as we kick it all off.